You know how every summer Australians wander down to the beach, breathe in the salty air, have a few too many wines, and suddenly convince themselves that owning a holiday home is a brilliant investment strategy. Well, in general, it isn't. In fact, it's one of the biggest financial traps I see Aussies fall into. And today I'm joined by Brett Warren, National Director of Property at Metropole, to unpack all the reasons why holiday homes almost always underperform, and why the numbers never stack up, and what smarter investors are doing instead. Now, even if you're not interested in buying a holiday home, I'm sure some of the principles Brett and I are going to share with you are going to be beneficial if you're interested in property. Hi, I'm Michael Yardney, and welcome to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. Look, after 5 decades in property investment, I've seen about every cycle, trend, and so-called crisis there is. And I know how confusing it is with all the mixed messages out there. Everyone's got an opinion, and not all of them are worth listening to. And that's why twice each week, I cut through the clutter to bring you clear, practical insights about building wealth through property. I share proven strategies, smart psychology, the lessons from some of Australia's leading experts. And today it'll be with Brett Warren. So whether you're just starting out or already on your way, my aim is to actually help you make better decisions so that you can grow your wealth safely, faster through property, and build the life of financial independence and choices you're looking for. So once again, even if you're not particularly interested in holiday homes, I think it's still worth listening to this lesson. And especially if you've had a moment on the beach thinking, gee, wouldn't it be nice if I owned a place here? This episode's going to save you a lot of money and probably a lot of regret. So let's get into it. Brett, welcome back.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be back.
Well, every summer, without fail, someone in the family turns up and asks, hey, is this a good time to get a holiday home? Or clients ask us, do you get the same questions asked to you?
Oh, look, absolutely. I certainly do. And especially my mother-in-law, Michael, brings it up this time of year when we catch up for our Christmas break. Obviously, a little bit sunburn, relaxed and wine and walking around with an ice cream. It's a dangerous combination for investment decisions, isn't it?
It is, but I guess that's how many Australians do things, isn't it? And yet, despite the appeal, you and I know that holiday homes are almost always a terrible investment mistake. Now, you've written an article about this, and I know it's got a lot of traction because it hits the nail on the head. So I'd like to walk through our listeners and our viewers some of the realities, not the fantasies. So why do you think holiday environments are such a dangerous setting to make an investment decision?
Yeah, look, I guess your defences are down, as I kind of said before. You're a little bit relaxed. You're enjoying the company of others. Maybe you've had a bit too much wine, and you start to settle into a lifestyle that you probably want to end up with at some stage one day. So I guess naturally thinking achieving that today may be a good outcome.
Sure. Well, it's fun, and you'd like to continue on the fun times all year round.
Exactly.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? But I know over the years we've discussed this and we've helped clients at Metropole with this, that they are an investment trap. I know that in Surfers Paradise, the local estate agents love Christmas time of the year, the holiday time of the year, because they call those tourists from interstate ice cream lickers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, they absolutely do. They're walking around looking in the shop window like they used to, or probably more surfing on the internet more so than they used to today, Michael. But they certainly, it's an easy thing, isn't it? And I think people can mistakenly combine the thought about retirement and potentially living in a certain location with investing. And the two should be very, very different things. But for some reason at that stage of year, it all becomes and blends into one.
Now, again, that doesn't mean people shouldn't have holidays and deserve holidays, but mixing the two together, a holiday home, people justify it, I guess, don't they? They say, yeah, but I can rent it out when I'm not there and it's going to have good capital growth. Now, there's no doubt that some holiday locations, and in particular, certain segments of the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast and Byron Bay have actually exhibited pretty strong capital growth. But as property strategists, I know you and I and our team at Metropole believe that capital growth is what you should be aiming for. Why can't you count on that in holiday locations, Brett?
Yeah, well, look, I can see probably some of our listeners arguing that point, Michael, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years. I think you outlined there's been a number of areas that have performed exceptionally well. But when we do our research, we actually go back decades. If you're thinking of you're going to retire in 10, 15, 20 years, I want to know what's actually happened in that last 15 or 20 year period. And quite often they significantly underperform. They don't have the multiple pillars. They don't have the economic environment, the demand for those types of properties. And quite often there's a lot of supply. And, I guess, as we kind of mentioned, that as a result, that it's just not there. In the last 4 or 5 years, the market has been very different. But over a longer period of time, even a 1 or 2% capital growth rate can be fairly significant over that period of time.
So the difference of 1 or 2% is what you're
Yeah.
saying, so you can do better.
Correct.
I think there's a confusion, Brett, between physical growth. Look at all those towers everywhere. It is growing.
Yeah.
As opposed to what the value of those apartments in the towers are.
Yeah, and there's a number of other things as well, isn't there? Because, I mean, I don't know about you, Michael, but probably every 5 or 10 years, my retirement plans change. I want to go over here or over there. I find somewhere else to go. So there's also quite a high opportunity that you probably don't want to retire there in 20 years' time. So you're really making short-term decisions based on short-term information. And the other thing is, from an investment perspective, certainly your money's just not going to work hard enough for you. Even if you invested your money elsewhere, you could probably come back and buy that property in 20 years' time and have plenty of money left over to have a comfortable lifestyle.
Or you can have a great investment property elsewhere and swap where you stay each year, because that apartment, as you clearly said, is probably going to be old, and there'll be a better complex wherever you're talking about in all the holiday locations in 10, 15 years' time. But people justify it by saying, oh, that's okay. Look, I don't worry too much about the rent because I'll Airbnb it. Is that a flawed assumption?
Well, look, it can be. I guess, look, Airbnb's one thing. I mean, we're seeing around the globe at the moment, there's some bit of a crackdown on Airbnb. So who knows where it's going to be in 10 or 15 years' time for starters. But also there's a lot more management of that, high costs. It's something that I certainly wouldn't want to manage myself.
Yes.
And sure, you might get a reasonably good rental return, but that's associated with higher risk as well. So, you're not necessarily going to have full occupancy. You're competing against a lot of other apartments and a lot of other areas, particularly in holiday locations where people are trying to achieve that. So it can definitely be flawed.
In fact, I've heard that most investors who buy holiday apartments underestimate, first of all, what you already said, the occupancy, because yes, if you could get that Airbnb rent 365 days of the year, that'd be nice. It doesn't work that way, especially in the big holiday locations where there's so much competition. They underestimate the costs because Airbnb does have a lot of costs every time people move. And rental management fees in a lot of holiday locations, property management fees are considerably higher, Brett.
They are. And don't forget, Michael, I mean, most of the time we probably want to take our holidays over Christmas or Easter, and they're peak times. So, you're going to have to waive those fees and those times to be comfortable and take the lesser amount.
Well, recently the tax man made some clear warnings. So the tax man on purpose gives out media releases. Maybe I should say tax person. It's probably more political correct. I'm sorry, Brett. Gives out clear warnings to people, and they've got holiday locations, including Airbnb, on their sites. So what they're saying is, if you want to actually claim a tax deduction for a property in a holiday location, it actually has to be properly available for rent. You can't say, oh, no one offered to rent it over Easter, so I fitted in because no one went there. They've got access to Airbnb and stays. They've got access to property management data from all the property managers. They've got access to all the portals. So they actually want to make sure that you are, if you're wanting to claim a tax deduction, offering it correctly or proportioning it correctly. So as you say, you usually want to be there at the time of the highest demand. So Airbnb may sound like a good idea at the time, but I'm not sure that it is. I also found that I personally like the stability of a large percentage of owner-occupiers and gentrifying areas where prices don't go up and down as much. Holiday locations seem to be more cyclical in their values and supply and demand.
Yeah, they do, don't they? And I guess the other end, Michael, we're talking about rental growth as well. So in these kinds of holiday locations, there's always an abundance of properties you can rent, and
yes,
the growth of the appreciation of the rent doesn't really, go up exponential. Whereas if you're buying an area with a high demand owner occupier and there's a lack of tenants and availability, that's going to drive growth as well. There's more incomes, higher incomes and demographics. So again, it might be borderline over the first 5 years, but I'm sure 10 or 15 years down the track, you could have a substantial increase in just an ordinary asset. And I think we're starting to lose that period where the time lapse, where the tax office hadn't caught up, we were getting great returns, people weren't cracking down on these kinds of things, but it just gets more and more and tougher each year, doesn't it?
Sure. So again, when people come to Metropole to build their wealth through property, the first thing they tend to ask is, where should I buy? How much should I spend? What's the top location for the year? And I know that your team of property strategists go up a level and say, hang on, where are you? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? How do you want to achieve it? And there's lots of ways of achieving that end result. So I know that I'm in Melbourne, you're in Brisbane as we record this. And if I was to go to Brisbane, I could catch a direct flight going there. I could drive along the Hume Highway. It would take longer. I could stop off in Sydney and have a look for a couple of days, but I'd eventually get at the end location. So what we're saying is, before you decide what the right vehicle to get to your end financial destination is, understand what your journey is. And for some people, yes, they've got enough assets behind them and they can afford to have a holiday home. For the majority of people, it'd be better actually to run the numbers and figures and see what the alternatives are, because that way you take the emotion out of it, Brett.
Well, you take the emotion out of it, and you're missing. You correctly said there's people who have the ability to do that. It's generally they're quite wealthy, but it's not an accumulation strategy. And the other thing is, we've actually done those numbers, Michael. We've actually done retirement areas and holiday homes and stuff like that as well. And not only do you miss out on that substantial capital gain, there's also a holding cost each year, which is going to be a shortfall. And in some cases, $20,000 to hold a property that's a holiday home. Look, I don't know how many holidays you take a year, Michael, but certainly $20,000 is an ample budget to take 2 or 3 holidays.
Fantastic holiday.
Yeah, so and as you said before, we're not locked into the Gold Coast or other locations. We can travel around and take airfares and those kinds of things. So we're not tied to a location as well. So in the light of day, it actually does not make a great deal of sense when you're sitting there thinking about that.
Now, we're using the term holiday homes, and sometimes it's a home on a block of land. Other times, especially if we talk about the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, but lots of other locations, it's an apartment. And we know that the high-rise apartments don't have a large land component. And it's actually not how big the land is. It's actually the value of the land. So even a holiday home in many locations, the vacant block isn't worth as much. And that's the bit that appreciates over time.
Yeah, look, it certainly is. And I think obviously in the last period of time when there's been lockdowns and people are escaping to these kinds of locations, You've seen that growth. But I think the next phase of the cycle is going to be very, very different. So as you correctly pointed out, take the emotion out of it, sit down with someone who can actually model it all out and plan it, and then make a decision based on facts and data and research rather than just an emotional decision with a glass of wine in your hand.
Now, I believe investors should take a strategic approach, and at Metropole, that's how we help our clients. And I know your research department has looked into what's ahead for 2026, and we still see significant growth in all the capital cities. The end of the year, the capital median values are going to be higher in all the capital cities. Some will do better than others, and even within those capital cities, there'll be locations that outperform others by 50, sometimes even 100%. So we start with that top-down approach and put a strategic component to which capital city, which location in the capital city, then which suburbs in those locations, which properties in those suburbs, and then price down the bottom. So it's really very much a top-down approach. And you mentioned something a while ago that I think I'd like to just reinforce. The capital growth is going to be dependent upon others wanting to come in and pay more. So we're looking for gentrifying areas. So while all properties are going to be worth more because it's going to cost more to build properties, to replace properties, some areas will do well because people are prepared to, able to, can afford to pay a premium.
Yeah, they are. And you don't see that in holiday areas. Generally people are retirees, they're on holidays, they don't have ample budget to spend $50,000 too much on a property because they fall in love with it and things like that as well. So you're 100% right. It has to be about the growth of the property.
Now, interestingly, yesterday, I live in, a small apartment building. There's only 3 of us, and we got the full penthouse downstairs. Jeremy and Shirley, who don't listen to this podcast, so I can use their name and no one else know anyway, were rushing first thing in the morning to an Uber to take them to the airport. And I said, what are you doing leaving so early? I was taking my dog Lincoln for a walk. Our apartment on the Gold Coast you remember there were storms last weekend on the Gold Coast?
Yeah.
There were floods everywhere.
Yeah.
And so that they had to go up there to rescue their apartment. There are a lot of hidden costs with owners' corporations and other things that people don't take into account.
Well, you're right. I mean, I wouldn't want to be paying $10,000 a year for a pool, a gym, a spa I can maybe use 2 or 3 times a year. So that's definitely the case. And certainly a lot of storms and a lot of flooding in those kinds of locations. So it's all part of it. And as we know, I mean, buying things like that sometimes off the plan and things that's a recipe for disaster, really.
So people listening to this, we're not negative. We don't want to be negative. We see 2026 as being a good year for property, but for certain sorts of property. We also know that in the future, things will go wrong again. The world breaks once a decade, whether it's COVID, a global financial crisis, a geopolitical problems. And when things go wrong locally or nationally, what's the first thing people sell off, Brett?
Usually their holiday home, Michael, or their investment property, which sometimes can be both.
Yeah. So it's the holiday locations that are more up and down, aren't they? They lose
A lot
their.
more volatility.
Yeah. So what would you recommend they do instead?
Yeah, look, like I said, we keep harping on it, Michael, but it is the way to do it. Actually take a step back and understand what your end goal is and what time frame you've got there. And, if you're looking to buy a holiday home, run the numbers on it, understand the outgoings, what the risks are, because there's obviously considerable risk if you're looking at Airbnb and things like that as well. But, plan for things to change. They always do. They always have done. So the likelihood of you wanting to retire in an area in 10 or 15 years' time is probably unlikely. So always stick to the facts, the data, the numbers, make long-term decisions and you won't go wrong.
Now, it's the beginning of a new year when people are thinking about their plans for the year, and a lot of those are financial plans. So let me ask you, if you're watching or listening to this, how did 2025 work out for you financially? Did you achieve your financial goals? And what are you going to do different in 2026? I've harped on it a couple of times, but my recommendation to you is to get a good team around you and make some plans. Plan to become the property investor you plan to become. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes, and I'd like you to just go to metropole.com.au and leave us your details and have a chat with one of our wealth strategists to discuss your options. It's nothing to do with holiday homes. It's actually to do with giving yourself choices in life in the future so that you're able to enjoy your time, enjoy your assets, enjoy the time freedom you've got. And then you can have as many holidays as you like. And if you already own a holiday home, we're not saying sell up, but why not have a chat with the wealth strategist and let us run the figures, the numbers through our sophisticated software, whether it's a holiday home or not, so you can understand your options. That, I think, is the first step to making 2026 a good year in property, Brett.
Yeah, look, I agree. And maybe take that motivation of sitting there in that particular unit or place and working towards that, switch that motivation and desire into creating wealth and building that cash machine, Michael, so then you can have 3 or 4 of those places that you can travel to and you're not bound or tied into those kinds of things. So they're on the right path, but look at the bigger picture.
I remember a couple of years ago, you actually wrote a blog, Does Michael Yardney Own a Holiday Home? And it was very popular. And the truth is, I know you're going on a holiday then this year. I'm not sure exactly when this podcast's coming out, but it's over the holiday time. Pam and I are going away as well. You're going with your kids. We've enjoyed a number of holidays a year, but it's given our cash machine of our property portfolio has allowed us to do this. So just a word of caution, there are options. By the way, Brett, I think 2026, I said it's going to be a good year. I think it's going to be a year of two halves. The first half of the year is going to be driven by, now there's a level of stability in interest rates. We know they're unlikely to fall, but people at least know what their budgets are. There's huge incentives from the first homeowner grant pushing people into the market. Lots of first home buyers pushing up lower and medium priced properties. There's an undersupply and there's FOMO kicking in. But I think halfway through the year, in the second half of the year, things will slow down a bit. They're not going to dump and fall, but they're going to slow down as affordability creeps in. Again, my suggestion is get in. It's not too late. You should have made that decision 2-3 years ago now, I guess, at the beginning of 2023 at the bottom of this cycle. But it's not too late this cycle to still get in as long as you make the right decision.
Yeah, well said. I think there's different markets with different opportunities. So if you'd like to have gotten in 2 or 3 years ago, there are opportunities now where you can get in at that entry level and, certainly map that out and, move forward with confidence. So thank you.
I think one of the big differences is that we don't sell property, and so therefore it really makes no difference to us where you invest. So have a chat with the team at Metropole. I'll leave a link in the show notes. And I hope today's discussion has helped cut through the sunshine and sea breeze that often clouds property investors' decisions. As we've said a couple of times, holiday homes may feel wonderful in the moment, but for most Australians, not all, they're a financial handbrake, low growth, investment income that isn't as high. It's actually often more inconsistent, higher costs and lifestyle limitations. What Brett has highlighted today is something I've seen over the 5 decades I've been investing in property. the wealthy don't chase lifestyle first. Brett, I think that's one of the things, isn't it? Do the hard things now and you have an easier life later. Do the
Yes.
easy things now and you may end up having a harder life later.
Yeah, it's even just the smarter things. I guess it's just taking away that instant gratification, short-term thinking, replacing it with the longer-term vision. So it is a hard thing to do, but once you actually get it done, it's actually quite simple with that process you've created, Michael.
Isn't it? So I think the wealthy build wealth through strategic investment-grade properties in locations with real underlying economic drivers. And it's that wealth that eventually gives them the freedom to holiday wherever they want, whenever they want, without tying up millions in a property that may not grow as much. Now, by the way, if you know somebody who's listening who needs this information as well, why not just share this podcast? Every podcast app has a share button or a little arrow to send it to somebody. And if you've listened to this and you're not currently a follower, a subscriber, please subscribe on whichever podcast app you're listening to this on, and actually click the automatic download button so you get Brett and my commentary regularly. So before you get swept up in the romance of holiday destination, remember, you don't need to own a place to enjoy it. Lest your investment portfolio do the heavy lifting while you enjoy the flexibility of traveling widely and living the life of your dreams. Now, Brett, I'd like to catch up with you because, as I openly said, even though this is coming over the holiday period, we're actually recording this at the end of 2025. So every year you and I sit down and look back at the lessons we've learned so we can help our clients. So is it okay if we catch up next week and actually unpack 25 lessons that we learned in 2025 to take people through into 2026?
Yeah, love to. I'll start thinking, Michael. Put my thinking hat on.
It'll be interesting to see how your and my thoughts align. They often do, but let's see what we come up with.
Absolutely. Sounds good. And if you could share that that podcast with my mother-in-law, Michael, if you get a chance, I'll send her the email and you can...
Maybe we'll stop that conversation over the Christmas table.
Exactly.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Regular viewers and listeners know that each week I offer you a property trivia question. Go to propertytrivia.com.au and leave an answer. And this is related to the conversation I just had with Brett Warren. And each week, 3 people get a copy of one of my books. And there's been 3 books updated at the end of last year. You've got a chance of winning one of those, as well as everyone, whether you've got the correct answer or not, gets a property report, an updated report of what's ahead for 2026. And don't worry if you've listened to this or answering this a bit late. Every property trivia question answer counts. So the question for you is, what's the number one economic driver that holiday towns tend to lack, which dramatically limits long-term capital growth? So this is a question Brett answered about the job markets and economy. Oh, I've given away a hint there. So what's the number one economic driver holiday towns tend to lack, which dramatically limits long-term capital growth? Leave us your answer so you can get a book. Go to propertytrivia.com.au.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
Today's mindset message is an oldie but a goodie about putting your rocks in the jar first. Let me explain what I'm on about. Have you ever noticed how easy it is for life to feel full, but not satisfying? Your calendar's jammed, your inbox is overflowing, everybody wants something from you, you're busy from sunrise to sundown, yet somehow you still feel you didn't get to do those things that genuinely mattered. Look, I don't know about you, but every time we have this new time of the year, I set myself some new intentions for the months ahead and the year ahead. And there's a little metaphor I revisit each year because it cuts straight into the clutter. It stops the clutter. Look, you've probably heard it before, but it's worth hearing again, because the older I get, the more I realize this isn't really just a story about time. It's a story about priorities, about values, about the kind of life you're quietly building when you're not paying attention. So let me take you back to it. It's a story about the rocks in the jar. A professor walks to a classroom and places 4 simple items on a table: an empty glass jar, a pile of big rocks, a pile of pebbles, and a pile of sand. Without saying a word, he fills the jar with big rocks. Is the jar full, he asks, and the students nod. Of course it is. Then he pours in the pebbles. They settle in between the gaps. Is it full now, he asks. Another round of nods. Finally he pours the sand in, and it slips between every little crevice. Now there's no question the jar is full. What does all this really mean? Well, the professor goes on to explain the jar is your life. The rocks are what matters most, your family, your health, your purpose, your values, and the people who actually show up for you. The pebbles are important, but not essential. Your job, your projects, your social connections, things that support your life, but don't define it. And the sand, well, that's the noise, the scrolling, the emails, the errands, the busy work disguised as productivity, the things we say yes to because it's easier than saying no. And the moral to this is painfully simple. If you lost the sand and pebbles, you'd still have a full life with the rocks. But if you fill the jar with the sand first, there's no room left for what really matters. Now, this is why this matters at this time of the year in particular, because the sand is sneaky. It disguises itself as urgency. It taps you on the shoulder when you're trying to do meaningful work. It fills your day before you've had a chance to show how you actually wanted to spend it. You wake up determined to work on a big idea, and then suddenly it's 4 p.m. and you've been managing everyone else's priorities instead of your own. Maybe you plan to exercise, but an unexpected email derails the morning. You're meant to call your kids or check in on a friend, but the day just got away from you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Busyness is often just sand wearing a clever disguise. Successful people, and yes, successful property investors too, don't have less sand than everyone else. They simply are more ruthless about what goes into the jar first. They protect the rocks. They make time for the things that genuinely shift the needle. They don't let unimportant matters crowd out the essential. So what does this mean for you? As you look ahead, I'd encourage you to sit quietly with this metaphor and ask yourself a few simple questions. What are your rocks? Not the things you think should be important, but things that actually matter to you. Write them down. Be honest. Be bold. Then, are your rocks getting the priority in your life that they deserve, or are they being squeezed out after pebbles and sand take over? And then ask yourself what needs to change, because you don't need a bigger jar. You just need to choose differently what goes in first. So my mindset message to you is a full life isn't one crammed to capacity. It's one where the most important things aren't fighting for the scraps of your attention. You get to choose the order. You get to choose the meaning. And ultimately, you get to choose the life you want to live. Why not pour yourself a coffee, sit down somewhere quiet and reflect for a moment? What's going into your jar first this year? By the way, choose wisely. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this, or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardley podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardley podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, Thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?